seat, Jackie MacDougall.
I'm back in my
She's trying
seat.
to break free from the room.
From the womb?
From the room. Yeah.
I was trying to break free because Kyle, our fabulous producer op dude, was taking a picture of us. Anyway.
That's the difference between men and women. Kyle just wants to post it immediately. The women are like, photo approval, please.
I know. I was like, let me see that photo. It's awkward. My face is very puffy today. Okay.
You look great.
So, see?
All right, people, it's about me. Seriously, like, really? Oh my God.
We keep preempting Kim. All right, so here's the deal. Kim was in New York this week on the Today Show, on Meredith Vieira's show.
Like on every show.
Her new book called Media Circus is, Kim, why don't you tell the world listening
About the Pope.
Oh my God, I have the feeling divided.
about the Pope?
Media Circus, a look at a private tragedy in the public eye, is a collective look inside the lives of 10 families that have been featured in high-profile cases over the last, couple decades, but dating back to the 60s. And I had the good fortune to interview them about what their experience has been like trying to grieve publicly with the media completely immersed in their lives and following them and watching every move they make. And then, of course, the introduction of the internet and social media, and then how connected people in the community feel towards families that they see on television or in the news, and how polarizing that can be, and how in that same vein, how supportive and inclusive that can feel. Mm-hmm. But just really each chapter tells a different story from all these families. And I was hoping to kind of paint a picture of what it was like back in the 60s to present day.
Yeah, I mean, from like the Manson, from Sharon Tate's family.
Yeah, all the way through Eric Garner.
Which was so recent.
Right.
And then, you have the Aurora shooting.
Yeah, Aurora shooting, Newtown shooting.
The Sandy Hook. Yeah.
Sandy Hook, thank you. We have Skylar Neese, who her two best friends brutally, as if there's another word, but killed her and left her to die in the woods, and they thought she was just missing. That was trial by Twitter, but people might know that. We have Matthew Shepard. It was the first gay crime. We did Judy Shepard. We did Terry Fassbender, which was a story that those of us in the room are too young to know about, but her whole family was killed on the Bluebell, and she was lost at sea for 4 days.
That story
is the sole survivor.
Unbelievable.
And she was featured on the cover of Life magazine, because Life magazine used to be the publication back in the day, and she didn't tell her story for 50 years. And so we tried to talk about what it was like to be completely shielded and
But her family, she was on a boat, and her whole family was killed, and she was left on that boat.
Yeah, she was left to die. The captain, the captain who was the killer, the boat was sinking, and he opted to save himself and thought she would go down with the ship, and she ended up floating along in the sea for 4 days.
Goodness.
So that's pretty. I mean, we just who am I missing? We did the Amish school shooting. We did the DC sniper's ex-wife.
She's amazing too.
Yeah. So I felt really fortunate that all these people let me into their life. Colleen Campbell. I can't believe I'm forgetting Colleen, whose brother was Mickey Thompson. He was a famous NASCAR race driver. And I was so humbled by the opportunity to tell their stories. So.
Well, I think that your perspective and watching these interviews, I love you as my friend, but like, you were so graceful and you were so, eloquent and well-spoken, and you take such responsibility and care with their stories that I can't imagine anybody else telling them the way you do.
Well, and I appreciate that. I mean, I think, part of what our connection is, unfortunately, to people that have lost, interestingly enough, today is also National Remembrance Day of Murder Victims. So it's a good day to be talking about this in honor of people that have been touched by violent crime. We get it. And there's an understanding that you don't have to say a lot to just understand what someone feels. But in these conversations, I was able to ask questions that, quite frankly, the media didn't ask because they didn't care. The media is not going to ask, how did it feel when we, put up cameras across the street from your private funeral and, took pictures of you in your vulnerable moments? How did it feel when we disguised ourselves as doctors to get into the hotel room to get pictures of your loved one in a coma? Like, how did that feel? Like, the media is not going to ask that. And so when I was able to talk to these families, what insight they shed, I was blown away. So, I'm very, I feel grateful. I'm not dismissing the fact that my experience allowed me to have that kind of access. And so, trying to do something good with it.
So when I got here, I was saying to you guys, I was like, I have a million questions.
Now you have 2 million.
And now I have like maybe 2.5. Because
I just want to talk about the Pope.
But the thing is, but yet you'll go on shows, and I think Savannah on the Today Show. She did a good job with like talking about the book. Yeah. But then you went on Meredith Vieira, and hey, I work in daytime television. I know how it has to be produced. They sensationalize things, but it was all about the fact that next week is the 20th anniversary of the acquittal.
Right.
And so you were on with one of the jurors, but that's not how it was supposed to go. I like that we get the behind the scenes. Who were you supposed to be on Meredith Vieira with?
I was supposed to be on Meredith's show with another family member from Nicole's family, and at the last minute, I don't know this because I didn't speak to her, but she got cold feet.
And she was literally there in the dressing room next to you.
Yeah, and she got cold feet, and I totally get that. I respect that, and I unfortunately didn't have a chance to speak to her when I was there, but it was too much because the thought of putting herself back in 20 years earlier and having to sit in the room with a juror that, gave our killer an acquittal.
So there were two jurors that were also.
Thank you. The 2 jurors, and then one of them suddenly wasn't there either. I'm not exactly sure what happened to that one.
But I mean, you saw when you arrived.
Like, if I just hang on, it's just going to be me here. And then I can take down Meredith soon. I can have my own show.
Suddenly it's the Kim Goldman show.
Yeah. But listen,
featuring Jackie McDougall.
Honestly, when the opportunity presented itself, I was not excited. I was wishing and hoping that it would get canceled. It was not what I was looking forward to the whole way there. I was like, I don't want to do this. And
why'd you say
apparently
yes?
It appeared that way too when I did the interview. Because I don't have anything to hide. I didn't do anything wrong. I have nothing to be ashamed for. I'm not afraid of my opinion that I've had for all these 20 years that the jury didn't do right by our family. I just was uncomfortable,
Right.
That's not a situation that you often find yourself in. But
I think I fell in love with you a little bit during that interview because, most people just try to hide or sugarcoat or whatever. And you were like, and she's like, how does it feel? And you're like, this is awkward. And we have a link to that interview too on broadscast.com. But, you're sitting next to a juror who I thought there'd be some revelation, like she changed her mind,
well,
or
she
like
supposedly had other things to say, and then they didn't come out. So I don't know all of that. But Meredith Vieira was trying to pull some questions or answers out of her that I guess had changed. Yeah, had changed.
Because people don't understand there's a pre-interview, so a producer talks to that guest and gets all this information,
right?
And so that way they're able to write the questions for the host.
And quite frankly, go ahead, Jared.
No, I was going to say, as someone who's done millions of those pre-interviews, it's so frustrating to sit there and like, oh my God, if you don't just ask her this one question, if you don't just say, oh my, are we going to get to, like, that's really frustrating. And then as a guest, you're like, I thought we were going to talk about.
Well, and I think, and not in defense of Yolanda Crawford, the juror, I think that when the second jury didn't appear, she probably felt really kind of alone, singled out, and so I don't know what was supposed to happen.
In some ways, social media didn't exist the way it did.
Right.
Back then it didn't exist like it does now. Like imagine, and then she goes out and says, "I regret." She could get death threats, and I mean, I understand that, but So you sat next to her and.
Yeah, but listen, what part of the reason that we did that I opted to do the if I did, oh my God, $3 ago. The reason that I opted to do the Media Circus book was because when you're involved in high profile cases and stories, you don't really get to opt out of them. So, a lot of media has been asking me like, what do you feel about the 20th anniversary of the acquittal? I'm like, I don't know, same thing I felt yesterday and 2 years ago, and what I'm going to feel next year. Like, it's a day. Like, the fact that you're making an issue about it is why I don't ever get to have a life that's just my own anymore, because even if I opted not to participate, that show was still happening.
Right.
All of these shows were still happening.
Right.
Listen, I got called to do something yesterday and they refused to mention my book. And they're angry at me for not wanting to do a show that talks about the acquittal. How dare I not participate in their show? And I'm like, but you won't mention the book that I just did. And they said they're offended by my position. I'm like, well,
then why are you asking me to come on?
But my point is
you're supposed to provide yourself, Kim, like for 20, 30, 40, however many years people talk about it.
Right.
But never have a voice and never have
Right. And so my point is this interview is still happening, whether or not I'm choosing to participate.
Wait, I want to know who it's with.
No. So, but one of the things that we talk about in the book too
It's
is
just
that
us.
the families always talk about at what point, if you don't participate, the story happens without you. And that's when the mistruths happen. And that's
Right.
when it gets beyond what you're comfortable dealing with. And so then you participate and then it spirals. And
Well,
so when do you pull back?
And,
Right.
and this
That's
day and
such a
age,
fascinating point.
well, in this day and age, whether you participate or not, like the story is going to be, told 17,000 different
Right.
ways because of social media, and everyone has a blog, and everyone's, a newscaster, and so I feel like it's a lose-lose situation either way you go,
Right.
but you can try to control it as much as you can by participating.
And that's what I remember asking you when your last book came out last year, Can't Forgive. I know, let's see how I'm plugging
This is
that.
the All Kim book hour.
I know, right? But I had said to you, why are you doing this? And you were like, they tell my story, whether I participate or not. Why wouldn't I take control of my story? And you're
Right.
right, because, we see the same video over and over with you in court, with crying and
Right.
the hair flip, which you still do.
I've reduced the number of flips, though. I'm working on that. Yeah.
But so we all, I didn't know you back then. So everybody has their perception. And I love that when we first became friends and I was like, wait, you're not sitting at home crying.
Right.
Like, you're funny and self-deprecating and silly and, able
Because
to
your
make
life isn't defined by this event, even though
Right.
you, for a lot of people, are defined by this event. Like
Right.
your last name will always be attached to that for some people.
Right. Right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Hello.
I don't know how this works. So, no. Okay, so
Neither do we.
I've always been fascinated in these kinds of scenarios because, and I'll preface it. I have a good friend who her husband cheated on her, and her whole family was like furious and and was like, leave him, And I called her and I said, I get that it's easy to say you want to leave, but if there is any part of you that wants to stay, I'll understand that as well.
Right.
And I say that to say, I'm curious, being in your position, being so close to this case, if there was any point, if there was any space for you to question what happened, because everyone has opinions on what happened that night or whatever, but was there any space for you to ever feel like, what if this happened the way that they say it happened or the way that we said it happened? What was the feeling being inside of, this case and your brother's gone and I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's no space now for me to question because I was presented with 1,000-something pieces of evidence that made it very clear to me.
But I mean then,
Well, I didn't, we've always been very vocal that I didn't make a clear distinction of guilt until the DNA was presented because I couldn't argue away the science because me, like Bill, I'm kind of a science person, so Bill
Kim
Nye,
Goldman,
yeah.
the science.
Gail.
Something.
Yeah. So for me, there's no other way to explain it. I didn't buy all of the planted, botched, I didn't buy any of that. There was no proof. It was just, it was floated theories that the jury obviously bought into, but I didn't believe in the racist cops. I didn't believe in the conspiracy. There's no reason that hundreds of police officers not knowing where the killer was that would be planting in part of this whole conspiracy. There's no reason. I mean, there were 20-something cops at the scene far before Mark Fuhrman was there who saw the whole entire crime scene and they didn't know where the killer was. So why would they even take a chance to, ruin all of their careers when for years before they had been so supportive of him? They had autographs with him. They let him go when there were issues around domestic violence. I mean, why would all these cops go to such great lengths to frame him? It never made any sense to me. So, and it still doesn't. But there's lots of people that want to believe that all cops are bad, and I get that. That's just not my experience, in my opinion.
So the other question I really want to ask is this case, as a young black man, this case, there was all this racial conversation around, guilt or innocence and how black people feel versus white people and all this different stuff. And I was curious, how did you experience that in the time and how have you experienced it since it's all been?
So I was raised to believe that all people are equal, and I never saw people in terms of the color of their skin ever, which was a real shocker for me when I landed in this because now suddenly I was supposed to look at people by the color of their skin, and I was very confused by that. And I always said that I wish I wasn't so naive, but I'm glad I was so naive because I didn't live my life feeling judgmental or, an elitist because I was white. Like I never had any of those
Right.
feelings. But then to be in this situation, I was now suddenly having to question where people were coming from based on the color of their skin, which and I didn't think that was what I was told I was supposed to be doing. And I was upset by that. I think that Johnny Cochran and the defense team did a real number on dividing our country even more than it already was at that time. It was very split, but I got to tell you, I don't think that the polls and the TV screenshots and all that showing blacks versus white was really indicative of how the country as a whole feels. I mean, I can't tell you how many people came up to us that were black and said, we don't think like everybody. We're not like everybody else. Or people that were afraid to talk to us because we must think that all black people thought that he was not guilty. I mean, we're just...
Well, that's what the media does. They're like, the black community, really?
We all voted for Barack Obama. We all...
Right.
Yeah, or the gay community, or the, like, you cannot take,
We all watch Logo.
millions of people and and put them all into, like,
one side,
Right.
yeah.
I was listening to someone the other day. I don't even know who she was actually, and she said that our trial was, she's like, "Come on, face it. It was because a black man killed a white woman." I'm like, "What? What's happening? Like, why is that what we're doing now?" Like,
Wait, someone on TV said that?
yes, and
I love that you pretend that you don't know who that is.
I don't know her name.
Oh.
She was one of the. This is terrible. She's one of the co-people on Mirror the Show. They all had a roundabout talking about our trial. But I guess before I was there, I don't know who she is, honestly. And she's all about race.
Jared's gonna find out.
It was all about race for her, and I was like,
Well, because what's interesting about that is, though, there was just a headline in the past couple of days saying that when a black person is killed, it's always handled differently in the justice system than when a white person is killed. So, like, there is like theory around that, but I think this case, while there will always be debate around how race played into it, I think there were so many elements. There's celebrity, there's murder, there's domestic
Money.
violence,
It's the
there's
only
money,
case like this
so
that
many-
we will never have something like this.
Let's hope.
Because it does encompass all of these different areas that make it. I mean, that's what made it so famous and made it so huge, because there were
But I don't think in the beginning that this case was because he was black and that his two victims were white. I don't think for 1 second that occurred
was
to
because
anybody.
he was who he
wasn't
is.
until Mark Furman got caught saying something that it became. It was never brought up about a black versus white thing until all of those racial comments appeared out of nowhere.
But what's interesting to me, and I just know this through personal conversations, but you don't hold anybody responsible, Mark Furman, the prosecution, anybody, like, you don't hold any negative feelings toward them for not doing their job.
I think they did their job. I think that the defense did it better in the sense that they were able to convince the jury of their verdict. I mean, I think that Marsha and Chris went above and beyond what was probably done in most cases, and that's really hard to say because there's lots of people that probably don't get the coverage, they don't get the advocacy, they don't get the commitment. And I think that Marsha and Chris, they were the only people that were advocating for my brother. I mean, aside from
Marsha Clark and Christopher Darden.
Thank you. Aside from the DA investigators and the police department and the forensic specialists, I mean, everybody that lost careers over this, that were denigrated, that were, had their own death threats, that could never practice again because of what happened in this case. I'm grateful to them for being my brother and Nicole's voice. And what the defense did, I guess you're entitled to that, but they hit below the belt on so many occasions, as did the defense in the civil case. I mean, the disparaging comments they made about my brother in open court, it's disgusting what you go to win your case.
That's the thing, is like he was victimized all over again. But what I find interesting is, when I was searching online this morning, there's a whole thing like you're doing, you'll be on 2020 tonight. We know this, 10 o'clock, right?
Sure.
10 o'clock on ABC.
And what they're talking about is the documentaries that are coming out. Two of them. One is The Secret Tapes of the OJ Case, The Untold Story. That's on September 30th.
Right.
On LMN.
Okay.
And then A&E, OJ Speaks, The Hidden Tapes, October 1st at 9 p.m. Anyway, so... But but the ABC News story online was that Kris Jenner reflects.
So one of the tapes...
Everybody knows that Kris Jenner was Nicole's friend. And that she and Robert Kardashian, when they were together.
Right.
So he was on the other side. defending, and she was on, sitting there. But they act like she's been sitting there. So give us your take on this.
I'm so annoyed with this. Kris Jenner, I get it. I get it. She's who she is today. She went to court one day, and I don't even know if it was for the full day.
And this was like months.
Yes, it was 9.5 months. I know when she was there because I never missed a day in the 9.5 months. And I'm not taking away her pain. I'm not taking away her relationship. But she was not an active member of that prosecutorial team. She was not an active member of the audience. Like, it's okay that she wasn't. But I feel like we are making such a concerted effort to infuse her into it now because it helps with ratings and it helps with her brand and her name. And it is what it is. Again, I can't control that, but I can tell you straight up that she was there for one day of the trial. And I almost want to say that it was there for the closing arguments, but I can't exactly be sure of the day. So that's how long she waited. Wow. It wasn't like in the beginning.
And the same thing with their daughters, the ones that were actually born.
Yeah, they talk about being in court all the time. I have no recollection of any of Kardashian's kids being there. Doesn't mean that they weren't, but I have no recollection of them specifically being there. It's always the killer's family and lots of people in the media, but I don't have any direct memory of them. But the tapes are Larry Schiller, Lawrence Schiller, whatever his name is. He was very...
Who is that?
I'm going to tell you. Okay. He was very enmeshed into the defense team, and he was like their confidant. And he was a media person at the time, maybe a director, producer. I don't know. I found it to be quite disgusting. And he followed them around, and he wrote a book with the killer. He did a video series with them. And apparently he has some tapes of conversations with he and Kardashian. I've never seen them. I don't know anything about them. That's airing.
So they didn't show you these tapes before you did?
I didn't. I learned about them
you're involved
online.
With these.
Yeah, we participated in them. The deposition tapes are part of one of those documentaries. Again, I don't know which one. I can't remember. Those are deposition tapes from the civil case that we brought against the killer.
Have you heard those before?
Well, I was there for those depositions. I didn't. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't allowed to. I think I've seen bits and pieces, but quite frankly, I can't remember if I peed today, so I don't remember if I saw all those tapes. But those tapes are ours. Those are part of our family. And so we shared those so that people could see exactly what happened during the deposition. And those are two different sets of tapes.
And none of these involve Kris Jenner.
I don't know about the Kardashian stuff. I honestly have no idea.
Right.
She's a regular feature in the new series that's coming up.
Oh, yeah. Well, we have to go to break, but we have to talk about that. The new series. First of all, I want to know who you think should play you if you had your choice. But like the fact is that, they have an actress playing you, I think in 1 or 2 episodes, and Kris Jenner
is featured in 10.
Is like a regular.
Yeah, she's a series regular.
So it's just, this is what happens when it comes to, entertainment, and it makes me want to take a shower every time I'm involved in it. But so we're going to go to break, right, Kyle? We'll be right back with more Broadscast. Introduce us. Come on, Jarrett. Bring us back.
Hi, I'm Jarrett, and this is Broadcast.
Broadscast.
This is I love saying Broadcast. I think Broads being in Broadscast is hilarious.
Well, we don't expect world domination, but we do expect autocorrect to change broadcast to Broadscast.
Well, I don't think that's asking for the moon and the stars, and I can show you how to make your phone do that.
Let's just tweet at the Pope and have him do it.
Exactly.
Oh yes.
So should I jump in with another
question? Do your thing.
Okay. So again, a lot of people define you by this event in your life, right? And you're like, this happened, and I've done a million other things in the last 20 years. I'm curious how often do you think about this, and what do you think about when you do?
I think about my brother every day. I don't know any day that I can honestly say he hasn't popped in my mind, whether it's because my kid looks like him and his mannerisms are similar, or I look at myself and I'm like, oh, my brother would have had these same wrinkles, or whatever it might be. My brother is always very close to me. Do I think about the trial all the time? No. Do I think about the killer all the time? No. Do people see me for 10 seconds on TV doing a soundbite and think that I'm still angry and bitter and hostile and money hungry and all those things? No, but for those 10 seconds, I might be, because something may have happened that brought it to my attention. But, I live my life in the best way that I can in honor of my brother, but also to leave a legacy for myself and my kid. And, I run a charity working with teens, and I get to do this with Jackie, and I'm just me who happens to have a life that's on television.
Right. And it's amazing, though, because we'll be out somewhere and people recognize her all the time.
God.
Tell the story.
So we had the good fortune of being invited to a party in New York. It was the premiere of the Dateline season premiere, and we knew some friends, and so we invited us. And this man walked up to me with this messy gray hair, and he was like had this bag, and he just like a
Bernie
mess.
Sanders.
Yeah, he was a mess. This guy, and he walked up to me. He's like, and he's staring at me, and he said, "Who do people tell you that you look like?" I'm like, I don't know. This just got awkward. He's like, "Come on, who do people tell you?" And I said, "All right, Jennifer Garner, Jennifer Aniston, and Kim Goldman." He goes, "Yeah, I could see all three of those." Guy, and it I don't even know if it ever.
And then did he ask you if
He's like,
your name was
Nancy? And I'm like, no. He goes, phew. I'm like, okay, this is just weird now. Yeah,
awkward.
Yeah,
but I mean the run-ins like that, like with people,
That's
and
hilarious.
it's interesting. Remember we were like at a concert in the park, and some cop was like trying to talk to her.
But here again, shameless plug for my book, that the reason is because it's not, you don't get to just have a life. People think that they know you, and it's been hard in my dating life. It's been hard in my professional life to do something that I get to stand alone. Even writing this book that has nothing to do with me, I'm still being told that I'm money hungry. I'm profiting off the killer's crime, that I'm an opportunist. There's always something negative. And I'm like, I'm trying to do good. Like, I don't come into your world and tell you that as a insurance agent that you're making money off other people's tragedies. Like, I mean, it's the same thing, right? It's the same
That's
thing.
That's an awesome comparison. Yeah,
right.
I guess something I never thought about with your story specifically is you were kind of like on the periphery of all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like your brother was friends with her who was in a relationship with him, and you're like so many levels removed, but like you were thrust into this story because of your relationship to it. And that's like an interesting dynamic, because we always look at, if we talk about Kris Jenner or whomever, like,
they push themselves into it.
They want to be in that. They're opportunists. And it's like, no. I actually wasn't involved at all. I was thrown into this. You guys showed up outside my house, So it's
when you talk about with all these families, you have to find your way when you're immersed in grief and shock and denial and confusion, and how to navigate this, because there isn't anybody to come along. There's plenty of people that will come along and say, for $20,000, I will help you learn how to talk to the media when you've just lost your loved one. But for most of us, that doesn't happen, and we can't afford that anyway, and that's not what you're thinking about. But when you're put in this situation and there's people that come to you and say, I want to tell your story, I just want to hear everything you have to say, and you pour your heart out, and then they take what they want and they crumple you up and leave you behind, that no one explains and helps you through that process.
Right.
And that's when I say it can be really isolating, because there's so many people that will be your best friend for 10 seconds.
Right.
And you don't understand that's happening in that moment. On the flip side, there are plenty of people in the media that do right by victims and survivors and forward their, further their stories and their missions and come back to promote their causes and, their foundations. And I have plenty of people that I'm still very close with in the media that have been nothing short of respectful and sensitive and kind to me.
Right.
So I'm not painting
But it's interesting
picture.
in your book, in Media Circus, how they talk, about how it's the hardest and yet comforting to have the public feel this pain for your loss too.
Well, and think about it, when you've been touched by evil, because someone else has taken your loved one from you in such a brutal way, to then get an opportunity to be surrounded by such kindness and love, it's a really leveling experience, and balanced experience. And again, I think that's where, you accept it and you love it. And then of course there's the trolls that will find their way in and are horrible to you. But for the most part, it is really just like an equalizer.
So who would you want to play you in this?
Oh my God, I don't even know the girl that is playing. I don't even know her name. It's been said to me. I don't know her name. I'm sorry,
Jennifer Aniston, right?
Or Jennifer Garner.
Or Jennifer Garner.
I don't know. I don't think about it. It is weird that it's happening. It's uncomfortable, and I know that there's going to be a lot of creative license that's been attached to that, because it needs to be made for TV. But
have they even talked to you about it?
No, I'm not surprised. Why would they consult with me? Then they'd have to.
Because then they'd have to
pay me.
Well,
God forbid.
Yeah.
Exactly. But Jared Hill, thank you for joining us. We always love having you on.
I love being here.
It's nice to have you in person.
And thank you for not telling her when I almost ran you over in the crosswalk.
Oh my gosh, she almost hit me with her car outside, you guys. I mentioned it, sorry.
Yeah, and I want to thank also our sponsor, Stark Social, who we absolutely love.
They do such good work on the
social
website.
marketing firm with an emphasis on small biz, startups, and nonprofit organizations, and they can service budgets of all shapes and sizes.
And I want to thank you, Jackie.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, I don't know, just because.
And make sure to go
Have a great week. We will see you next time.